Hello, and welcome to the first episode of How Does It Work, the series that helps players understand the basic functionality of popular add-ons and how to get started with them. My name is Gubstep, and in this first episode we will be covering arguably one of the most popular add-ons in World of Warcraft, WeakAuras. This will be a simple guide on how to track buffs and debuffs on both you and your target. While the WeakAuras scope goes far beyond this video is meant to be short and sweet to get beginners familiar with basic tracking in WeakAuras. So let's get started. To open WeakAuras, we want to type /WA. As you can see, I am an avid user of WeakAuras, and will cover more advanced usage of WeakAuras in future videos. The most popular trackers that are used by players are icons, text display, and progress bars. While there are many other ways to display information to the user from WeakAuras, this is what we'll be covering in today's video. All three of these options have the same backend functionality for tracking, but will display the information differently to the user. We will create the same WeakAura 3 times, as an icon, as a text display, and as a progress bar. This is just to get you familiar with how to create a simple buff tracker in WeakAuras. We will start by creating a WeakAura group to hold our example WeakAuras. Click New in the WeakAuras panel, then Group. Go ahead and name it whatever you like. I will call mine Example WA. Groups are a great way to move and change multiple WeakAuras at the same time, saving you a lot of time. Let's create our first tracker. We will start with an Icon WeakAura. Just like before, click New, and then click Icon this time. Go ahead and name it whatever you like. I will call mine Icon Example. We will now move our newly created Icon WeakAura into our Example WA group. Click the arrow icon in the bottom right corner of our newly created Icon Example, then click Example WA. Our icon has now been moved into our group. We will revisit groups later on in this video after our 3 WeakAuras have been created. Make sure you have your icon example selected in the left panel. At the top of the right panel, you will notice 6 tabs: Display, Trigger, Conditions, Load, Actions, and Animations. In this video, we are only covering the basics of 3 tabs: Display, Trigger, and Load. For our 3 examples, we will be tracking the buff from the Pride-As legendary. You may select any buff on yourself, this includes mounts. Later, we will track a debuff on a target. Make sure you are on the Trigger tab. The type of thing we will be tracking is an aura. Both buffs and debuffs fall into this category. The unit we are tracking is the player, you, and the aura type we are tracking is a buff. If you only want your WeakAura to display above or below a certain time, check the remaining time box, select an operator, and input the remaining time. In this case, our buff would only show up if it only had less than 5 seconds on it. The same concept goes with stack count. The Own Only checkbox means it will only show the WeakAura if the aura that you've selected is casted by you. For example, say you have 2 Restoration Druids in your group, and you are tracking Rejuvenation. If you do not have the Own Only checkbox selected, and the other Restoration Druid casts Rejuvenation on you, your WeakAura will still pop up. However, if you have the Own Only checkbox ticked, it means that it will only display if you cast Rejuvenation on yourself, or the target you've selected in the Trigger tab. Show On. This has 3 different parameters: always, buffed, debuffs, and missing. Always mean the WeakAura will always show up, regardless of whether you have the buff or not. buffed and debuffed means that the weak aura will show up when that buff or debuff is on the unit you've selected in the trigger tab. Missing means that the weak aura will show up when the buff or debuff is missing from the unit you've selected in the WeakAuras tab. Alright, let's go ahead and get started tracking our Pride as Legendary. At the top of the trigger, you notice that it says required for activation. We want to go down and hit trigger 1. This just means the weak aura requires trigger 1 to be active in order to display. We will enter our aura name. Looking at the Pride as Legendary buff, we can see that the aura name is Zavrex Magnum Opus. If you are not tracking the Pride as Legendary, go ahead and enter your buff name in there. We are tracking the buff on ourselves, so we'll go ahead and leave player as it is. And the aura type is a buff, so we will leave that alone as well. If you want, you can mess around with remaining time. Since the Pride as buff isn't going to be cast by anyone else on me, it doesn't really matter whether this checkbox is actually ticked or not for the own only. However, for good measure, we'll go ahead and check it on. Now, if we exit out of WeakAuras, we can now see that we have an icon in the middle of our screen depicting that the Pride as buff is active on us. However, it's not very useful. As you can see, it's just an icon. It doesn't depict how much duration left is on it or anything else like that. We'll get into that soon. But for now, let's move on to progress bars. Just like our Icon WeakAura, we're going to create a new WeakAura by going to the top of the left-hand panel, clicking New, and then we're going to do Progress Bar. Name it whatever you like. I will call mine Progress Bar Example. And just like the Icon WeakAura, we are going to put it in our Example WeakAuras group. So go ahead and click the arrow in the bottom right-hand corner. Find your Example WeakAuras group and click it. It has now been moved. My calculus teacher always says iteration is the key to success, and that's why we're creating multiple WeakAuras, but using the same triggers. So, we will do the exact same thing, tracking the Pride as Legendary buff. Make sure your progress bar example is selected in the left panel. Go to the Trigger tab, and now for Aura, go ahead and enter the Pride as Legendary aura name, Zavrex Magnum Opus, or whatever buff you're tracking. And we will check own only for good measure. Now if we exit out of WeakAuras, we can see that the progress bar is actually quite a bit more useful. It shows us the name of the buff, the duration, and the icon. While all of these can be configured in the Icon WeakAura, it's not straight out of the box, and some people prefer bars over icons. However, we will go through how to set up the Icon WeakAura to look similar to this. Now we will do a text WeakAura. Go ahead and open up your WeakAuras window again by typing /WA in chat. Again, we'll hit New, and then we'll go to Text. Name it whatever you like. I'm going to name mine Text Example. We're going to move it to our Example WeakAura group. So in the bottom right hand corner, hit the arrow, and find your example WeakAura group, or whatever you named it. Okay, make sure your text example is selected in the left panel. Make sure the trigger tab is selected. Now we're going to do the exact same thing we just did with the two other WeakAuras. And put in our aura name. Check on own only for good measure. And this time we're going to move this out of our other WeakAuras. So click the little padlock and move it up so you can see it. Now exit out of the WeakAuras panel, and now you can see the text displays the duration left on Magnum Opus. We can put other things in there, such as custom text or buff names or different things like that, and we'll go over the basics of that in this video, but not quite yet. Now I know what you're thinking. Gubstep, there's a bunch of crap in the middle of my screen. I don't want to see this all the time. Luckily, WeakAuras comes up with a solution for this. Go ahead and open up your WeakAuras panel by typing /WA. This is where groups are invaluable. Select your example WeakAura group, and then click on the Load tab. The Load tab has a variety of options of when you want to load the WeakAura. For example, if you only want to track the buff in combat, select In Combat. If we exit out of the WeakAuras panel now, you can see that it won't come up. However, if I enter combat, all of the WeakAuras will pop up on my screen, provided I still have Pride as equipped, or whatever buff you selected. Now that we've got basic player buff tracking down, let's move on to the Display tab. Type /WA to bring up your WeakAuras panel. We'll start with the Icon example, since it was fairly basic and not really that useful. So if we go to the Display tab, there's actually a cooldown checkbox that makes life pretty easy. By hitting cooldown and show cooldown text, it will actually show us the Pride as buff ticking down along with a nice overlay. So we'll go ahead and uncheck our In Combat so I can show you this and exit out of the WeakAuras panel. That's much more useful. So that's how you display your cooldown overlay and cooldown text on icons. Let's go ahead and jump into the meat and potatoes of the Display tab. Reopen your WeakAuras panel by typing /WA, hit Icon Example, and go to the Display panel. We've already covered cooldown and show cooldown text, but we'll cover some other things. Say you don't want to display the cooldown text, maybe you want to display something else. Well, that's fine. You can display anything you want. Say, for example, you want to display the aura name. WeakAuras has a nice feature by typing %, and it usually has most of the common things you would want to track built into it. So %n is the name of the aura. And we can see in our icon that it comes up with the name of the aura. It's a little sloppy, but this can be done for anything. Say our text example. Hit our text example, go to Display, change %p to %n. This displays the name of the aura we're tracking. Now, if we add %p for progress, this will display the name of the aura with %n and the duration of the aura with %p. That's much more useful than just a name or just a progress. Heading back to our icon example, we can select glow, which puts this nice glowing aura around our icon. Now in our next video, we'll get into conditions, and I find glowing to be invaluable for conditions. If something is really low on duration, I'll set it to automatically glow, and it gets my attention easily. So look for that in the next video. Now this is where you can adjust the width and the height of icons. Now icons are a factor of 8, meaning that if you want to keep the aspect ratio of an icon, the square, instead of having it all weird and distorted, keep the factors of 8. 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 56, 64, 72, 80, 88, 96, 104, things like that. Now I'm going to switch over to the progress bar example display. I'm not going to get too much into it because a lot of this stuff isn't really relevant to just messing with the GUI of the progress bar. Usually it involves some sort of custom background code to make use of it. However, there are a couple nice things that you can do to make your progress bar look pretty. Progress bars have 2 text fields, one on the left and one on the right. You can see that we have the name on the left and the progress on the right. You can change the orientation of your progress bar, so instead you see how the red is moving down towards the left. We can change that so it's flipped, whatever your personal preference is. We can also set minimum progress, meaning the bar won't tick down unless the minimum has actually been set. So, for example, if we set it to 3, you can see that the bar doesn't fully refresh at 8 seconds. And the same concept with set maximum progress. Now on any of these displays, you can change the icon. You aren't forced into the icon that is automatically provided. And that's a good thing, because sometimes the auto icon isn't what you want, or maybe it just doesn't work. So for the icon example, if we go up and deselect automatic icon and hit choose, we can use their search engine to look up an icon, maybe a name of a spell or something like that. Or even if we wanted to select the actual necklace instead of the magnum opus icon. Either way, you can set it to whatever you want. If you want to set it to, a hunter icon of some sorts, that's fine. You do you. Whatever is gonna work for you. So here I am in my warlock safe space where no one can get to me. And I've come here so I can show you how to track debuffs on targets. It's very similar to tracking buffs on yourself. So let's go ahead and open up the WeakAura panel. Type /WA. We're gonna go to the top, select new. And you can either do icon or progress bar. I'm going to do icon because that's my personal preference, but whatever is gonna make you feel better. We'll name it whatever we want. I'll name it example debuff. We'll go over to our triggers tab, and now I'm going to track my debuff agony, which is a dot for warlocks that I put on the target. It's an aura, since it's a debuff. The aura name is Agony. Now we're no longer tracking things on ourselves, the player. So we need to change the unit to target. And we're no longer tracking a buff, so we need to change the aura type to debuff. And we aren't really concerned about any other agonies besides ourself. So we'll go ahead and check on own only. Now, it doesn't really make sense to have just an icon in the middle of my screen if I'm trying to track the duration of my dot. Now, progress bar people won't have to worry about this, but if you're doing an icon like I am, go to the display panel and hit cooldown. We'll go to text. Instead of stacks, we'll change the S to a P for progress. Now we'll exit out of the WeakAuras panel, click our target, and cast Agony on it. Now we can see in the middle of our screen that it's counting down our Agony on the target, which is super useful. Now we're going to get into multiple triggers. This is probably one of the most useful things WeakAuras has to offer, and that's because most classes don't want to cast big spells unless they have certain buffs up. So go ahead and open WeakAuras by typing /WA. We'll create a new icon and call it example multiple triggers. Now make sure you're on the trigger tab, and at least for me, we will track my Deadwind Harvester. This is a buff I get from my artifact, and when Deadwind Harvester is up, I want to be casting Unstable Affliction. So, now we'll add a second trigger by hitting Add Trigger. This type will be an aura, and the aura name will be Unstable Affliction in my case. The unit we're checking for is on the target, and it's a debuff. Now, if I have Deadwind Harvester on me, presumably I should have Unstable Affliction on the target. So we'll hit Own Only, and if our Unstable Affliction is missing from the target, then the WeakAura needs to be displayed. Now if we go back to the top of the trigger panel, required for activation all triggers. That means that if I go into combat, the WeakAura doesn't actually show up. However, if I activate my artifact weapon for Deadwind Harvester, the WeakAura shows up, letting me know that I'm okay to cast Unstable Affliction. Hello, and thank you for watching this video. I really wanted to cover more on WeakAuras, but since it's such an in-depth add-on, I ended up cutting the video a little short. 20 minutes is still pretty long. I will get into more nitty-gritty details of WeakAuras in the future. This video was mostly aimed at absolute beginners and people new to World of Warcraft that maybe haven't even used an add-on before. So if you like my channel and want to see what I'm doing in the future, hit that subscribe button. If you want to get updates on my video, hit the bell button, and I will see you next time.